Alright, in this video I will be redoing the wall insulation in my basement. You can see there's a mix of drywall, pink insulation, there's tar paper behind the upper wall, the lower wall has nothing on it, and everything is actually 2x3s rather than 2x4s. However, there's enough of a gap behind the 2x3s that they are effectively a little bit larger than a 2x4 would be. So I can get 3.5-inch insulation in that gap without it being too tight in there. You can see there's quite a big space between most of it, so it's not too bad. I view this as more of a retrofit. Obviously, I might approach this differently if it were a new build. So you can see there's lots of spots where I got to do a little bit of fix up. These, I don't know if this was code at the time, but the electrical wires are just kind of hanging there. And there are some gaps that are going to require some spray foam insulation as well. For the insulation, I'm using Rockwool Comfort Bat, and this is R14. So I got two different types. One is the 24-inch for 24-inch on center framing, and the other one's 16 for 16-inch on center. So the only wood I can get for the bottom plates is 2x4s, so I cut those down to 2x3s, and I got this cut and seal so that I could treat the cut edge from where the pressure treated wood was cut off. I'm using a pretty junky paintbrush, but that's okay, it just needs to go on. So you can see that most of these are going to be 24 inches on center, and I'm going to build the lower wall the exact same way that the upper wall is set up. And there's one that is significantly larger than 24 on center, but that's okay because it's going to be in the center of a sheet of drywall, so I'll get over that. And that last one's 24 on center. So I just sort of dry fit the lower wall in there. Basically, I used the level, made sure the bottom plate was directly under the existing wall, and then just cut boards to length. Now I'm just going to use a pencil to mark where each of them should go on the bottom plate so that when I remove it, I can nail through the bottom and I will know which board is which and where it should go. And to nail through the bottom plate, I'm using these ACQ approved pressure treated nails. The other thing I'm going to do is put some Tyvek on the bottom. I'm using the Tyvek on the bottom because the insulation is going to be very close to the wall. All the insulation I removed was about 30 years old and it didn't have any signs of moisture, so I'm not too concerned about that in this house because obviously it's been good for the last 30 years. I think it's going to ideally continue to be good, but I will put the Tyvek on to ensure that if any moisture does creep through, it won't actually get right into the insulation. So I'm going to staple it right onto the front, and then I'm going to tuck it under and staple it underneath as well. In the event that water does come down and gets behind that tar paper, it'll also go behind the Tyvek and straight down to the floor. I'm not going to worry about that upper chunk again. There's no signs of moisture up there, so I'm not too concerned. Obviously the Tyvek I got wasn't quite wide enough, but that's okay. I just rip cut a small piece and taped it onto the bottom. The blue tape is better than the red tape, but I have the red tape, so that's what's up. For the 2x3 studs, I just put 2 nails through the bottom plate and into the wall studs. And obviously I'm just taking the hammer and tapping them into place. Once I make sure that they're fairly level vertically and directly underneath the upper wall, I'm just going to put 2 screws into each. I'm going to do a top attack to get these screws in there, essentially coming at a pretty steep angle to the wood. Once I've got the upper portion of the wall attached, I'm now going to shoot some nails through the bottom, but first I'm just going to make sure that everything's straight and vertical so that I don't have a wonky wall. And to secure the bottom plate to the floor, I'm using a ramset nailer. Basically, I'm going to put 1 nail in between each of the vertical studs going down the line. Now for the second piece, I found that it was bowed out significantly in the center, so I nailed the 2 ends to the floor. I'm using a bar clamp and a 2x3 pinned against the stairs to straighten out the lower portion of the wall, and then I just put 1 nail through there to hold everything in place. The only other thing I'm doing is using some screws to fasten the 2 portions of the lower wall to each other just to give it a bit more strength. Now I didn't show drilling through the wall so I could run an electrical cord through there, but I did drill a hole straight across at a height of 32 inches right through the whole thing. That's so that once the insulation and plastic are up, I don't have to get back in there to run any cabling. And because it's only a 2x3 wall, I'm also putting these protective plates up as well. You see I've run the electrical, I've dry fitted one outlet box in there and just sort of laid the cable out. This is more of an insulation thing, not an electrical thing, and I'll worry about that electrical stuff later. So I'm going to use the 24-inch bats first. For this I am using a dust mask. Although this product claims to be safe, and I'm sure it probably is, there really are no solid particles that I truly want to breathe into my lungs, so the dust mask is probably a good idea. So because it's a 24 on center wall, these fit in fairly well. However, the insulation bats are a little bit longer, so I just cut about an inch off the bottom and slide it into place. Now because the electrical behind the wall is actually pretty loose from how it was run previously, I guess that was code back in the early 90s, it doesn't actually have to be cut out on the backside to accommodate that cabling. And you can see it fits in nice and tight and doesn't sag at all, so it's good stuff. I do like this product. So there's the top section of the wall pretty much done. You can see that was the one that was bigger than 24 on center, so I had to get a few chunks to fit in the empty gap, and now I'm going to cut some of those 16 on centers to fit into these smaller gaps. The 16 on center stuff is a little bit cheaper than the 24 on center stuff, so it is beneficial to have some of the 16 on center stuff to do these smaller gaps instead of wasting your 24 on center bats. So even on the 16 on center, I do have to cut them down vertically and cut off the bottom. These bats cut very easily with a bread knife, so it's really not very time consuming or a big deal. And one thing I might not have mentioned earlier is I also did put insulation behind the 2x4s just sort of loosely. So there's the wall fully insulated, and now it's time to put up the 6mm vapor barrier. So I am going to use acoustic sealant for this, and obviously the 6mm vapor barrier and a stapler. So I'm doing the top first, really doing about 3 feet at a time, coming across with the acoustic sealant, and then stapling through the 6mm plastic and the acoustic sealant all the way down. So do a couple feet, staple it, do a couple feet, staple it. The sides, very much the same deal. Put down some acoustic sealant, and then I'm going to come across with the stapler to fasten it into place. And I'm also going to do all the studs all the way down to make sure that everything's fastened securely. For the bottom, exact same thing, lay down the acoustic sealant and then staple right through it. So now you can see the acoustic sealant is all the way around on the wall, top, bottom, and sides. And really the final step now is to integrate the plastic from the rim joists that I had done previously to the new vapor barrier on the wall. This is a pretty simple process. I'm taking the scissors and cutting the 6mm plastic that's covering the rim joist down to a more workable size. Once the vapor barrier on the rim joist is cut down, I'm going to come around with the stapler and secure it to the wall. Once that's done, just to improve the vapor impermeance of the whole system, I'll take some of the red tuck tape and just seal all the edges. And I will carry that all the way down the wall across all the other rim joists as well. For the electrical outlet, you see I pulled the plastic air barrier through the vapor barrier. And once again, I'll use the tape to go 360 degrees around the device box just to ensure that there's no air leakage from around the outlet. And that is one wall complete. The only other thing I didn't really show is I hit the floor joist with some tape as well, because there was obviously some gaps where the plastic couldn't reach. So I've covered those with some tape. Overall, fairly easy job, a little bit time consuming having to cut all the boards and then put up all the insulation, which all needed to be cut, but I think it's going to make a big difference this winter, and perhaps if it gets hot this summer, having floor to ceiling insulation and properly insulated rim joists should make a big difference on my heating and cooling bills. Anyway, thanks for checking out my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.